Here was this guy teaching premier athletes to use their bodies to be great on the court. But what he was really saying with that quote, mental is to physical as four is to one, is that your mind or your mindset is four times more important to your overall success than anything your physical body's going to do. We're all scared. You're going to make mistakes. There's no perfect person, no perfect job, no perfect company. Nothing's perfect in life. So understand you're going to make mistakes, but figure it out as you go along.
If you could offer Terry from 20 years ago one piece of advice, what would it be?
That's a great question.
All right, welcome to the show, Terry. It's great to have you on.
Bamsey, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Awesome. So Terry, you've been an NCAA Division I college basketball player where you played against Michael Jordan a long time ago when he was a freshman. You've also been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a customer service manager, a SWAT hostage negotiator, a business owner, a high school basketball coach, and a cancer warrior. So it's a very varied history.
I'm just old. That's all that means. So
fair enough. Yeah. So today we're going to cover mainly entrepreneurship lessons, things you've learned from your journey, advice you can share with young aspiring entrepreneurs, and also, yeah, of course, general life advice and mindset advice, because those things are very important. As you mentioned in another interview, 4-to-1 ratio of mental to physical. So I'm sure that applies to business as well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's something, as you mentioned, I played Division I basketball. That mental is to physical as 4-to-1 came from Bobby Knight, who was the basketball coach at Indiana for forever, I guess, since I was growing up. He recently passed away. But yeah, here was this guy teaching premier athletes to use their bodies to be great on the court. But what he was really saying with that quote, mental is to physical as 4-to-1, is that your mind or your mindset is four times more important to your overall success than anything your physical body's going to do.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So what was your first experience with entrepreneurship?
I mean, it really goes back to being a kid. I mean, my parents didn't give my brothers and I an allowance. If we wanted money, it was, go cut grass in the summer, go shovel snow in the winter. I'm Catholic, so I was an altar server, an altar boy. And so you could make money by serving funerals or weddings and things like that. So it was really that of, my parents didn't want to give it to us. My parents wanted to teach us the appreciation for money, the appreciation for earning something out of life. And it wasn't just, here's $10 a week for doing what we expect you to do. And that's the way my parents viewed it. We expect you to contribute to our family, to empty the dishwasher, to cut our grass, to, shovel the snow in the winter and things like that. So there was no, we're going to pay you for that. We expect you for that. We're going to give you food. We're going to give you clothes. We're going to send you to school. We're going to do all that kind of stuff. So being a kid and learning and the importance of money and budgeting and things like that, that was really my first shot at entrepreneurship.
And then when did that sort of graduate into you fully supporting yourself through your own business?
It really didn't happen until probably my 40s. I had different, as you mentioned, my first job out of college was in marketing at the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. That was my first job. And then I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then I made that pivot, became a police officer in my life. And when I got out of law enforcement, it was like, well, I have all this training, all this experience, all this education. How can I put that to use for my own benefit? And so I started a school security consulting business where I worked with private independent schools around the United States to assess their physical security, write their policies and procedures, and then train their staff on different security things that might come up. So that was really my first foray into, well, I'm gonna venture out on my own and do my own thing.
Okay, cool. And then from there, how did you end up discovering public speaking? And is public speaking now sort of the thing that you find most fulfilling to do?
It is. I mean, I'm still somewhat limited. I'm still an active cancer patient. Still have tumors in my lungs, and so I'm treated every 3 weeks for an entire week. So I'm kind of off the air, so to speak, for that week. And so it's finding that purpose, finding something to do that fulfills me, that I feel that I'm actually contributing in some way. And someone suggested, you've got all this life experience, you've got all this experience from having cancer for 12 plus years. Why don't you talk about it? Why don't you tell people what you've learned about it and things like that? And I was initially, I don't really think I want to do that. And I felt the same way when I wrote my first book. It was like, no, I don't see myself as an author. I don't see myself as somebody that should write a book. But there's sort of an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never talked to me or anything like that, and said, hey, you should do this. But I think enough people were put in my path that were making the same suggestion. And I thought, well, okay, I'll try this. And, I started a speaking business, and then COVID hit. And like so many other businesses and entrepreneurs, I had to figure out a different way to deliver my message. And somebody suggested, hey, would you like to come on my podcast and be a guest? And my response was, sure. What's a podcast? I literally had no idea what a podcast was. And so he explained it to me. And I said, well, I'll try it. I'll give it a shot. And I was terrible. I was horrible. That first one, I had Post-it notes all around the camera. And he would ask me a question. I would kind of lean in and read verbatim off of the Post-it note. And I knew I was not providing any value, anything good to the audience. But then I kind of sat back and said, well, I like it. But, first time I ever drove a car, was I good at it? No. I mean, the first time I ever cooked a meal, I think I burned the water. The first time I ever studied algebra, I wasn't any good at that either. And I made a commitment to try to get good at it. I wanted to have good stories because I think that's how we all learn. If I told you something, you might remember it. But if I told you something and then told you a story that illustrated it, you would probably remember it or have a better shot at remembering it than if I just told you the thing. So stories are how we learn. So I remember talking to my publisher and I said, Scott, I listen to every podcast I've ever been on. And I've been on at least 600, probably closer to 700 podcasts around the world. And I want to see how many times I say, huh, or or, I give that pregnant pause, or do I have a better story to illustrate that point? Or can I tighten that story up? I want it to be good. And he was like, no, Terry, it's not about being good. It's just about not sucking. And I said, well, thanks for the title of my next book, just don't suck. That's not going to be the title. But, it was like, no, that's not what I want. I don't want to be average. I want to be good. I want to make it so that the host feels that he or she and their audience, whatever time they spent with me, 30 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever it was, that they learned something, that they came away from this smarter and better in their lives. And so that was a commitment that I made. And, you stumble along the way. It's nothing in life is linear, where you just keep getting better and better and better. It's more, you get better and then you get worse and then you get a little better and then you get better and then you get worse. So that's the way life really is. And that's kind of the way my podcast experiencing was as well.
I mean, clearly you've improved since then because you're a great speaker now. You haven't said at all, and you're very clear and eloquent. So that's great. So what advice can you offer to people who are afraid to start their first business, or they're worried it will fail, or they're just scared to take that leap of faith?
Yeah, I think fear is one of the biggest things. And I've been afraid to start things in my life. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. You kind of look at it like, well, maybe I don't have enough information, or, maybe I'm not smart enough, or what will people say about me if I fail? And I always tell, especially young people, that, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you feel you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. And the reason I say that is because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. And I love the story. There's a entrepreneur by the name of Jesse Itzler. And he was at one time, he may still be, one of the co-owners of the Atlanta Hawks in the National Basketball Association. And he's married to a woman by the name of Sarah Blakely. And Sarah Blakely started a multi-million-dollar company called Spanx. It's a women's undergarment company. And Itzler tells the story that he said when she started that company, she had $5,000 and one prototype. That's it. And she had been a door-to-door, and your audience is probably going to be like, what's he talking about? Facsimile salesman. We don't even use fax for the most part anymore. But that's what her background was. That's what her experience was. She was a salesperson in this technology that we really don't use anymore. And so when she started that company, the point he's making was when she started, she went all in. She jumped in and, made mistakes, figured it out along the way. And so many people kind of wait. It's like, okay, wait a minute, I've got to get the marketing in place, and I've got to get the HR and the distribution and the supply, and I've got to get all this stuff in place before I start the company. And Itzler's point about his wife was, if she would have waited, until everything was perfect, until everything was lined up, he said, I guarantee somebody else would have come up with that idea and would have run with it. So I guess the point is, we're all scared. You're going to make mistakes. There's no perfect person, no perfect job, no perfect company. Nothing's perfect in life. So understand you're going to make mistakes, but figure it out as you go along. And I think that's one of the sort of problems that we have as human beings. We seem to think that life begins when we get to the end of the rainbow or we get to the top of the mountain. Where life really is the journey getting to the end of the rainbow or to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that shift in perspective can help people appreciate what they have now and appreciate the beginning of the journey and value it, rather than sort of always be waiting for tomorrow, which will never come.
Yeah, it'll be better tomorrow. It won't be better tomorrow. There's the women's basketball coach at Duke University, Kara Lawson, has a great, she's talking to her players, and she talks about how we tend to think in life that, well, once I get through freshman year, life is going to get easier. Or, once practice is over, I'm going to have a better day, or whatever it is. And her point is, life never gets easier. We just handle hard better. We learn how to handle the difficult, the uncomfortable, the adverse things that happen to us in our life. Life is never going to get easier. The older you get, the more responsibility you have, and so it's never going to get easier. So understand that. And again, the part about life is not linear. You just don't start and go on a trajectory where you get to where you want to be. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of good and bad things that happen along your life. The important thing is to understand the lessons that those things are supposed to teach you. I love the quote from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who said, I never lose. I either learn or I win. And, if you think about that, even if you mess up, even if you make a mistake, and you're going to make mistakes, we all do that. We're human beings. We're flawed. If you don't learn the lesson, yeah, you're kind of a loser if you don't learn the lesson. But if you learn the lesson, you take that lesson and you apply it to the next step, or you apply it to your next business, or whatever it is in your life that you're dealing with. Life is all about learning the lessons we're supposed to learn. And everything we do is designed to teach us a lesson in some way.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, especially when you put it together like that. So if you could offer Terry from 20 years ago one piece of advice, what would it be?
That's a great question. I guess let me kind of put it together this way. First of all, especially for the younger audience that's listening to us, and even I guess for the older audience, you don't have to have it all figured out. Don't feel that you can't do something that, I've got to have it all figured out before I do it. You don't. You do not have to have it all figured out. And the other thing I would say is it's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want you to be successful. Hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
Great. So focus on people rather than things, right? Or work itself, because the
Yeah,
people
I
make
mean,
all the difference.
work will take care of it. But if you're not working with good people, if if your boss is a tyrant and is browbeating you and it's whip the ponies harder and stuff like that, if they don't care about you, you're going to get to a point in your business life where it's like, why do I care about them? I'm just going to use you for the money or the insurance or whatever it is I'm trying to get from you. I want people that are invested in the business. And the only way to be invested in the business is for me to be invested in them so that they feel that I care about them. And not just as employees, but as people. And I think another point, a really good point to make is, and this was something we were always taught when I was a hostage negotiator, is to always remain curious, always being talked. I love to talk to people. I probably drive people nuts. I ask them a million questions and things like that. But I find people fascinating. I mean, the books that I read are usually biographies or autobiographies. I want to know what make people tick. Why did you make that decision as opposed to this decision? Why did you decide that you were going to go down this rabbit hole instead of that rabbit hole? What makes people make the decisions that they make? I love understanding that and trying to figure that out. Why did Harry Truman drop the atomic bomb on Japan? I mean, millions of people were affected by that. But I mean, I don't know. But I read his autobiography or I read his biography and I found out why he did it. So I love to understand what makes people tick. And I think we should all be curious. That's how we learn. We learn from other people's mistakes. I mean, the world has been around for a long enough time now that most people have made the mistakes that you're probably going to make when you're trying to start your business or wherever you're going in your career. Learn from those people. Learn the mistakes they made and what they learned from it so that you don't have to make those mistakes. A lot of us make the same mistakes over and over and over again because we don't learn from the mistakes that other people have made as well.
Yeah, and it also, all of this comes back to reminding me just what you were saying about the end of the rainbow. And it reminded me of something Kobe said in I think an acceptance speech when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And he said that a lot of people seem to think that what he likes is winning games and succeeding and being famous and being awarded this award and so on. But he said actually the reason he's successful is because he really genuinely enjoys waking up at 4 a.m. and practicing 5 hours before anyone else does, and he enjoys that daily grind of improving his game. And so because he enjoys the process so much, he wins. The people who like winning don't win as much as he does.
And I think that's true. I mean, whatever you do, if you're going to start a company, you better like the grind. You better like the work that you're doing. Because if you don't, there are going to be a million distractions along the way that's going to prevent you and stop you from getting to where you want to be. So, that's, I think, the first rule of entrepreneurship. Love what you're doing. Love the work. Love the grind. The rest of the stuff will take care of itself. But if you don't love what you're doing, it's like, well, you know what? I'm going to take over the family business from dad. I don't really like the family business, but I'm going to do it because that's what's expected of me. There's a good chance you're not going to be successful. One of the podcasts that I listened to is an interviewee by the name of Ryan Hawk, or an interviewer by the name of Ryan Hawk. And it's, it just went out of my head. I'll think about it in a minute. But he talks about for every hour of content that he puts out, he spends about 15 hours in prep for that 1 hour. He reads the person's books, their blogs. He listens to their previous podcasts and things that they put online and things like that. He wants to understand the person inside and out. And he always talks about in his books about how, if somebody comes to me and say, hey, will you help me with my podcast? He said, I ask them, why do you want to put a podcast out there? And he says, if they tell me because I want to get more clients or I want to have better marketing, you got to tell me. I love digging in to people's lives. I love understanding what makes them tick and why they did what they did. If you love that part, then yeah, you can probably be a pretty good podcast host. But if you've got ulterior motives, like I said, something's going to come up. Something's going to come down the road that's going to be like, this is a distraction. And well, I'm going to go do this instead of doing that. There's a reason most podcasts never make it past 10 episodes.
Okay, yeah, so let's pick up where we left off. I think I had just shared Kobe's love for the grind. You shared Ryan Hawk and his 15 hours of research per single hour of content. And he doesn't help podcast hosts who don't love the grind. If they're just doing it for the output, the results, the marketing, the authority, then he knows they probably won't succeed in the long run. So for me, really what I love is the conversation. There are days when I feel really down and then I have a conversation with someone on the podcast and it's like it makes my week, right? And I struggled with the editing, the thumbnails, the title, everything. But now all of that I've streamlined into a process. So it takes me maybe 4 hours to publish a 1 hour episode, which I'm pretty happy with. So I can usually do it the same day. And I feel really proud of that. So yeah, I'll reach out to Ryan and ask him if I can work with him to grow my podcast.
Yeah,
I really love doing it.
Yeah, and those are the kind of people that he enjoys working with, and I can understand that. It's like you don't want to put in your time for people that their motives are not really what's going to get them in terms of being a podcast host to where they want to be. It's really I'm going to do this because everybody's got a podcast, so I might as well have one too. That's not a reason. That's not. If you figure people want to be smarter, they want to learn from podcasts. And if they don't learn from it, or if they learn from one or two episodes and then you ghost them because you're off doing something else, that's not something I think Ryan Hawk wants to put his time into.
Yeah, completely understandable. And that's a really good point you bring up is I think every aspiring entrepreneur and just any healthy person in general should try to identify where in their lives they're seeking to do things because everybody else is doing it. Like, I need to start a YouTube channel because everyone's doing it. I need to start posting on Instagram because everyone's doing it. I need to invest in crypto because everyone's doing it. And the pitfall with that is if you do anything hard based on that desire, you're going to give up, long before you succeed.
You are. And that's what kind of drives it. We try to live other people's lives. I want that because he's got it. I mean, it's okay to want stuff in your life, but I mean, I go back to the 10 Commandments. There's a commandment, don't covet your neighbor's goods. In other words, don't want something because your neighbor has it. Want something because I want that. And that's okay. That's fine with that. But then we start to be, he's got this job or she drives this car or this. And why can't we just be happy for them? You got $1 million. You're driving a really nice car. I'm very happy for you. That's your lane. And that's the lane you're supposed to be on. I'm supposed to be on this lane. I need to live my life. And I think where we get in trouble is we start to get outside that and we try to live other people's lives. We want things because other people have them. And then we end up like, that's just that's empty. You're empty in your life. And I've seen so many people in my life, that feel they're born empty. And that their job when they get out of school and they get into life, whatever that looks like for them, is then to fill their empty self up. I've got to make the most money and have the nicest job and drive the nicest car and live in the nicest neighborhood and have all the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full. We're born with everything we need to be successful, however you determine that in your life, already inside us. We just need to pull it out and use it for our benefit. And so our job in life, in all honesty, shouldn't be to fill ourselves up because there's always going to be one more thing that we're going after. It should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our family, of our friends, of our communities, and of our countries. And when you look at that, when you change that paradigm, it's not about what I get, it's about what I give. All of a sudden, life takes on a whole different meaning.
Yeah, I think that's a really elegant way to put it. And the way I look at this is a lot of people are living for their high school reunion selves, if that makes sense, right? Like they graduate high school and they're already planning the next 10 years for the high school reunion they'll have, where they just want to show up in the nice car with the nice suit and the beautiful woman on their arms and so on, where it's also performative. And I think that does lead to this dissatisfaction. because you're not truly living the life you were meant to live, and you're not becoming the person you have the potential to be. And I think some part of you knows that and ends up feeling that void.
I mean, I would agree. And I think we set these arbitrary goals, especially when we're young. Well, by the time I'm 25, I want to be making $100,000 a year. And by the time I'm 32, I want to be married and have a child. And we get to these arbitrary goals and we're not there. We're not making, 100 grand. We don't have the relationship that we want in life. And I think a better way to look at this, and I heard this once on a podcast, this gentleman by the name of Jeff Wetzler. And he said, don't look at life sort of in the 1 year aspect or the single event aspect. He said, look at your life in decades. He said, so in your 20s, you should do everything. You should anything that interests you at all. Get out there, do all kinds of things, make mistakes, blunder along the way, do all kinds of things. And then in your 30s, find those two or three things that really energize you, that really motivate you, and spend your time on those. And he said, then in your 40s, when you're older, you're more mature, you understand more things, find that one thing and dig into it deep. And he said, then in your 50s and 60s, you can reap the benefits of all that you did in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I think if you look at life like that, where, okay, I'm 25 years old, I'm not where I want to be. You still got 5 more years left in that decade. You still have 5 more years to figure that out. So, I mean, don't be so narrow, I guess, in your vision of where you want to be in life. Be more broad. Look at it more in terms of decades instead of years.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a really good point as well about events. I just read a book called The Fast Lane Millionaire by MJ DeMarco, and it really shifted my mindset around a lot of things. One of them is he said, a lot of people look at wealthy people or successful people based on the events in their lives, such as, oh, he sold his company for $100 million, or oh, they got married and now they're happy, or they had a kid and now they're happy. He said, you have to shift from that to a process-based mindset where you have to see that the process that led to that event was like 10 years of hard work, or 5 years of courtship and lots of arguments and failure and so on. And then they have a successful marriage and then they're continuing to work on it. And so when you look at it that way, you're not so envious. And then you ask yourself, rather than what event would I want in my life, you also begin to ask, well, what process could I put myself through for 10 years? And then once you know that, you can succeed at almost anything.
And I would agree with that. I think a lot of times we talk about goals, and I don't set goals anymore. I just look at the processes that I have in my life and say, are they serving me? Are they where I want them to be? Can I make them better? How can I make them better? I look at more the processes than the goals. I figure that if I've got the processes in place, the goals or the things that I want or desire will kind of take care of themselves along that way.
Makes sense. So what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are looking for a co-founder, but they don't know how to find the right person or how to judge, good from bad or good fit from bad fit?
Yeah, that's a tough situation. I mean, they always say you should never lend money to your family, and I think the same thing applies. Do you want to go into business, with your brother or your uncle or your cousin? Because there's all kinds of pitfalls that if things don't work out. I guess I would say, and I would say this would be true not just for entrepreneurship, but for people that you want in your life. I would say find people that have similar values that you do, and then ask what you see those values leading to. Do you want to be of service to other people, or is it, I just want to make as much money as I possibly can, and I don't care about the service part. Well, if you're an individual that cares about service and you go into business with somebody that doesn't care about service, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out that that's probably not going to be a good fit, a good mesh. I would say, really take your time. Find people that have the same values, that have the same goals, that have the same dreams. And I think it goes back to it's more important the people you work with and you work for than it is the work that you do. Spend a great deal of time making sure your values are aligned. Because if they're not, you're going to have a lot of frustration. You're going to have a lot of adversity, a lot of anxiety because I want to do this. No, I want to do this. And sort of the yin and the yang of it. You need to be on the same character. And he said, I believe character is developed in the first 20 years of your life, which is why I asked you questions about what it was like growing up in your family and in your high school days and playing basketball and college basketball and your knee surgeries and all those kind of things. I wanted to understand if you had the values that I have and that I want to bring to my team. And I thought that was kind of interesting. He said another thing. He said, and I also believe values are caught, they're not taught. In other words, you're not going to read a book and say, okay, great, I have great values. You're going to watch how other people handle situations. You're going to be like, man, I really like the way she handled that situation. Or, I don't think he handled that issue very well. And those kind of things develop your character. They develop your values and things like that. So I would say find people that have the same values that are going in the same direction that you're going. Well, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed talking with you.